In Colombia, a new opinion poll puts the presidential candidate for the historical pact, Gustavo Petro, as frontrunner for the May 29th election. Moscow started deploying logistics for the upcoming Victory Day celebration. Also this morning, the commander of the Russian Central Military Troops District explained the objectives of the second phase of the special operation in Ukraine. On Friday, a new attack by the occupation troops on the esplanade of mosques left dozens of Palestinians injured, some of them severely. At this time, the provocations and the violence of the occupying forces are generating major clashes that are already reaching the Gaza Strip. Hi, this is From the South. I am your news anchor, Diego Martin, from the Telstar studios in Havana. We begin with the news. In Colombia, a new opinion poll puts the presidential candidate for the historical pact, Gustavo Petro, as frontrunner for the May 29th election. The new poll of the National Consulting Center released on Friday shows that 38% of those surveyed would vote for Gustavo Petro. This is in contrast to the last poll published by the consulting firm, where the candidate for the historical pact obtained 36.5% of voter intention. The study also revealed that Federico Gutierrez remains in second place with 23.8%, whereas in the survey published on March 31st, that percentage was 24.5%. According to the results of the survey, third place goes to Rodolfo Hernandez with 9.6%, followed by Sergio Fajardo, who has 7.2% of support. Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro once again disrespected the Supreme Federal Court of the country by granting a special measure of grace and pardon to far-right-wing Daniel Silveira, previously condemned by the highest court. Silveira, considered one of Bolsonaro's main allies, was sentenced on Wednesday in a televised trial, and with 10 votes in favor and only 1 against, to 8 years in prison for attacking the Constitution and threatening to kill Supreme Court judges. Hours later, the president published his pardon in an extraordinary edition of the official newspaper of the Union. This decision further strained relations between the Brazilian powers in the context of investigations of far-right-wing followers of the president for attacking the democratic rule of law. In Brazil, the world-renowned carnivals returned after 2 years of suspension due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Our correspondent Brian Mayer has more on it.
I'm standing in Rio de Janeiro, where for the first time in 2 years, Carnival has kicked off. It was postponed. They were going to have it at the normal time at the beginning of Lent earlier this year, but because of the Omicron wave, they pushed it back to April. Now, this is the first time that a carnival has taken place in the city of Rio de Janeiro in over 2 years due to the COVID-19 pandemic. At the height of the pandemic, which killed over 660,000 people in Brazil, there were 2,500 people a day dying in the country. Now, with the death rate below 200, the state government and the city government have decided to just open everything up. There's no more mask requirements for anywhere except on public transportation. So 2 years ago, the last time they had Carnival in Rio, there were 100,000 foreign tourists who came to the city. This year, the state tourism department estimates that 70,000 foreign tourists are here, meaning that they've recuperated over 70% of the tourism that's so necessary, so vital for the economy of this city of 16 million. So tonight, for the first time in 2 years, the special group, the biggest group of carnival bands in Brazil, will be parading down the stadium in Sapucaí to a crowd of tens of thousands and a television crowd in the millions in Brazil's largest carnival event.
In 2021, Mexico became the third country in the world to receive asylum applications worth more than 131,000, a figure considered historic by U.S. immigration authorities. Representatives of the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees say Mexico now ranks below the United States and Germany. The figure was released at the presentation of the 2021 report Protection and Solutions in Pandemics by Giovanni Lepri, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees representative in Mexico. Lepri said Mexico faces a triple challenge in terms of asylum, that is, migration, displacement, and humanitarian protection. In this regard, he urges Mexico not only to strengthen the system, but also to open other alternatives to regulate migration in order to give options to people who do not necessarily seek refuge. Despite the extraordinary number and the demanding challenges, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees Foreign Affairs official Dominique Hyde said Mexico has demonstrated a great job.
I've been very impressed with the results and how Mexico has managed to receive the refugees here. So it is the coming together of countries I'm most proud of when presenting the results of this final report.
The president of Nicaragua, Daniel Ortega, described as irrefutable and clear the sentence issued by the International Court of Justice and demanded compliance by the Colombian government regarding extraterritorial maritime violations. On Thursday, the International Court of Justice of The Hague concluded that Colombia violated the sovereign rights of Nicaragua due to a lawsuit imposed by Managua for violations of its right over the Caribbean Sea. In this regard, President Ortega demanded that this resolution be complied with by the government of Colombia after authorities of the South American nation refused to obey the sentence. Faced with this situation, the Nicaraguan president emphasized that Bogota is challenging the highest authorities of the court by not complying with the ruling of The Hague, while denouncing the multiple criminal practices carried out by the Colombian authorities. The United States Attorney General Merrick Garland has assured that the former president of Honduras, Juan Orlando Hernandez, turned his country into a narco state and affirmed that he has received millions of dollars from drug trafficking to commit electoral fraud. In a press conference after the extradition from Honduras was finalized, Prosecutor Garland said Hernandez received money from criminals like El Chapo Guzman to finance his political campaigns and commit electoral fraud, including the 2017 election, whose result was endorsed by the observation mission of the Organization of American States, headed by Jorge Tuto Quiroga. The Attorney General's office assured that the former president ordered his associates to buy and manipulate votes. Hernandez stands also accused of corrupting the legitimate institutions of the Honduran state, including the police and the National Armed Forces. United States Supreme Court upheld the differential treatment of Puerto Ricans, ruling that Congress has the power to exclude them from social programs provided in all 50 states and the District of Columbia. 8 judges voted in favor and only 1 against the exclusion of Puerto Rican nationals from the Supplemental Security Income Program, which benefits elderly people with disabilities, as it does not constitute unconstitutional discrimination. Judge Sonia Sotomayor, daughter of Puerto Ricans, was the only one to vote against. Her colleague, Judge Brett Kavanaugh, said the court's ruling upholds earlier rulings that the federal supplemental revenue law excluded Puerto Rico and other U.S. territories. As it is well known, Puerto Rico is a United States territory since 1898, and its residents are U.S. citizens without the right to vote in presidential and congressional elections. We're going to take a short break now. Please join us again after this. Hi, and welcome back to From the South. A few hours before the beginning of Election Day in France, President Emmanuel Macron's re-election is in jeopardy, according to political and electoral experts who claim that the far right is closer than ever to the Élysée Palace. The president will have to accelerate the pace because the advantage he has over Marine Le Pen is very tight. For decades, France has rejected those it has considered enemies of democracy and human rights. For this reason, the extreme right has historically been isolated in the final round. Whenever a candidate from the far right went to the second round, almost monolithically, the rival left or conservative received all the support. The French Republican Front is weaker than ever. A proof of it is that the march in rejection of the extreme left organized in 2002 mobilized more than 1 million French people. The one of last Saturday barely surpassed 20,000. Moscow began deploying logistics for the upcoming Victory Day celebration. Also this morning, the commander of the Russian Central Military Troops District explained the objectives of the second phase of the special operation in Ukraine. Deputy Commander Rustam Minikeyev spoke about the progress made by Russian troops in Ukraine, about the withdrawal of troops from Kyiv, and he explained the goal of this new phase that began 48 hours ago is to gain control over the regions of Donbass and southern Ukraine. He said that currently Russian troops are fighting against the whole world, as it was the case during the Great Patriotic War, according to Minikeyev. Following recent announcements by Washington of more weapons being sent to Ukraine, the Russian Defense Ministry reminded the U.S. and NATO that any NATO weapons transport vehicle crossing into Ukraine will be legitimately considered as a target of war. The notification was signed by the Deputy Director of the North American Department of the Russian Foreign Ministry, Sergei Kushelev. At a meeting at the Diplomatic Academy of the Foreign Affairs Ministry, Kushelev said that transport vehicles carrying U.S. or NATO weapons passing through Ukrainian territory can be legitimately considered as a military target by the Russian forces. Kushelev said Russia will suppress all attempts to prevent the military operation in Ukraine from being completed on schedule. These statements come hours after U.S. President Joe Biden, amid a domestic economic crisis, announced a new substantial contribution to the Ukrainian forces authorized by his administration. Thursday, the Foreign Ministry in Russia imposed sanctions on 61 Canadian citizens and banned 29 U.S. citizens from entering the Russian territory, including Vice President Kamala Harris and Mark Zuckerberg, the head of Meta. The Foreign Ministry has warned that it will expand the list with more names in the future as a reciprocal response to Washington's hostile actions and Russophobia. The Russian Foreign Ministry reiterated that discriminatory measures against Russian officials, military personnel, experts, and journalists are the reason behind this decision. Since the beginning of the Russian military operations in Ukraine, Washington unleashed an unprecedented battery of unilateral sanctions against Moscow, encouraging its European partners to follow suit and promoting a dangerous campaign of hatred against Russia and its citizens. Concern is growing about the fate of Chilean U.S. documentary filmmaker, writer, and communicator Gonzalo Lira in Ukraine. Hours before his last contact on social networks, he had denounced Ukrainian security services. Specifically, on March 26th, Lira published a tweet in which he mentioned the names of several people kidnapped and disappeared for opposing President Volodymyr Zelensky. In the same tweet, he assured that if anything were to happen to him, the Ukrainian government was the only one responsible. Lira missed a meeting with filmmaker and journalist Dan Cohen, who has assured that the messages he sent to the Chilean citizen living in the Ukrainian city of Kharkiv have been checked by someone, but that they have not been answered. Amid the uncertainty, the well-known Ukrainian neo-Nazi Sergei Botsman-Kortkith claimed on his Twitter account that Lira had been kidnapped, tortured, and killed, but he deleted that tweet hours later. The Russian Ministry of Foreign Affairs also expressed its concern about the case, and the Chilean Foreign Ministry said they are in constant communication with different entities to find out about the situation of Gonzalo Lira, who in a video expressed his concerns about the Zelensky administration hours before disappearing.
If you do not hear from me in 15 hours or more, assume that I have been captured by the Ukrainian Security Service, and keep in mind that the one person responsible would be Ledelevis, for he has deliberately lied about me. He has claimed that I am not in Kharkov, and has admitted the fact that they are looking for me and want to track me down with every article I write.
Once again, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky appeared as a guest of honor at a meeting of a multilateral organization. This time it was a meeting between the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. Zelensky demanded $7 billion a month to compensate for the losses allegedly caused by Russia. Zelensky said that they will need hundreds of billions of dollars to rebuild the country. However, previously an advanced party of Ukrainian officials in Washington had told Kristalina Georgieva, manager of the Monetary Fund, that they would need $5 billion a month to keep the country's economy running. On his part, the Ukrainian Prime Minister said the country continues to meet its obligations in terms of welfare, pension payments, and salaries, and for that purpose alone, not to rebuild the country, they will need $7 billion a month. President Zelensky said Russian bombardments were destroying the Ukrainian economy. United States President Joe Biden once again said that the U.S. will not send a single soldier to Ukrainian territory. Biden said the United States do not intend to start a third world war. While Moscow says it is making progress in its military operation, Washington calls for the unity of NATO member countries and Europe. Biden has called for a steadfast stance before Russia, while saying that Ukraine must learn to defend itself. Biden says that so far he has held over 120 meetings with its allies, seeking support and contributions for Kyiv. Biden acknowledged the United States economy has taken a beat, and he recalled that he had predicted tough economic times and that there would be an invasion of Ukraine ordered by President Vladimir Putin, whom he again verbally attacked. He blamed his predecessor, Donald Trump, for his attitude towards NATO. We have more news coming up after a final short break. Please stay with us. On Friday, a new attack by the occupation troops on the esplanade of the mosques left dozens of Palestinians injured, some of them severely. At this time, the provocations and the violence of the occupying forces are generating major clashes that are already in the Gaza Strip. Unidentified men allegedly carrying flags of the Hamas movement threw stones at a wall in the esplanade. Minutes later, the Israeli forces arrived at the site and attacked the Al-Aqsa Mosque, one of the holiest and most important places of Islam. The alleged Hamas members disappeared as soon as the troops arrived and began to attack worshippers. According to the data provided by the paramedics, over 30 people resulted injured. Since the beginning of Ramadan, clashes between the occupying forces and the faithful have left more than 200 people injured, mostly Palestinians. Israel announced that for the first time it will incorporate the Chinese yuan into its foreign exchange reserves with the aim of diversifying its income, which last year amounted to $200 billion. Dollar funds will also be cut. The Deputy Governor of the Bank of Israel, Andrew Obeir, has said that this move will be part of a new change in the total investment guidelines and philosophy, which will also include the Canadian dollar, the Australian dollar, and the Japanese yen. Last year, the Bank of Israel had at least 67.4% of its foreign exchange in U.S. dollars, 30.1% in euros, and another 2.5% in sterling pounds. But now the whole structure has been realigned. Myanmar's junta chief on Friday called for face-to-face peace talks with the country's established ethnic rebel groups as the military struggles to fight newer anti-junta militias that have sprung up to fight the coup. Myanmar has about 20 ethnic rebel armies, many of which control swathes of remote border territory that have fought each other and the military for decades over the drug trade, natural resources, and autonomy. Some have condemned the ouster of Aung San Suu Kyi's government and offered shelter and weapons training to People's Defense Forces that have sprung up since the putsch. The call comes amid daily clashes between junta troops and PDF groups, some of which are fighting alongside ethnic rebels in border areas. Former Kenyan President Mwai Kibaki, who led the East African country for more than a decade, died. His successor, Uhuru Kenyatta, announced it on Friday. President from 2002 to 2013, Kibaki was a sharp-witted, wily, and veteran leader involved in politics from the very birth of independent Kenya. It is a shame for us as a country. We have lost a great leader, Kenyatta said in an address on state television. The president ordered a period of national mourning until sunset on the day Kibaki is to be buried, with all flags to be flown at half.
As a leading figure in Kenya's post-independence history, His Excellency Mwai Kibaki earned the abiding respect and affection of the people of this nation and other nations throughout the world. President Kibaki will forever be remembered as a gentleman in Kenyan politics, a brilliant debater whose eloquence, wit, and charm won the day time and time again.
The president of the Sahrawi Democratic Republic, Brahim Ghali, thanked the Cuban people for their support in confronting the COVID-19 pandemic. In a letter to his Cuban counterpart, Miguel Diaz-Canel, Ghali emphasized that the island's support and solidarity reflects the respect for the principles instilled by the Cuban Revolution. Ghali also said in the text that in the name of the Arab Republic, as well as in his own name, he expresses his gratitude and consideration for the great help given to the people in difficult moments. President Ghali highlighted the 450,000 doses of Cuban Soberana 02 vaccines donated to the Sahrawi people to fight the pandemic. Recently, the foreign minister of the Caribbean country, Bruno Rodriguez, indicated that the donation of the vaccine to the Sahrawi people is an expression of the historical relations of brotherhood between both states. We've come to the end of this news brief. Remember, you can find these and many other stories on our website at Telstar English. You can also join us on social media for all the latest news. We're on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Telegram. For Telstar English, I'm Diego Martin. Thank you for watching.